God. There's a whole group of weirdos on the internet that have 10-inch arms and play on their computer all day.
It all started with a voice that seemed unshakable, loud, brash, and totally convinced it could command every room. Wes Watson appeared to be the embodiment of that hyper-confident persona who spoke boldly about success, discipline, and an almost unstoppable will to take what he wanted from life. His fans saw it as pure motivation, a man who rose from difficult circumstances, turned things around, and was now booming at them through a camera lens, demanding they do better. It was a kind of performance that relied heavily on intimidation and bravado, and for a while it worked. People listened, they clicked, they shared. But there was another side to this relentless, self-proclaimed alpha, a side that started to unravel beneath the weight of too many controversies, too many contradictions, and one bizarre rumor that neither he nor the internet could let go of. The meltdown began in small flashes. One day he'd be ranting about discipline and calling out so-called weaklings for lacking the fortitude to take action. The next, he'd be firing off personal jabs at nameless online critics who, in his eyes, had no right to question his status. The volume of his tirades was skyrocketing, his frustration seeping through each new video more blatantly than the last. Soon enough, the cracks in his armor became too obvious for anyone to ignore. Viewers started noticing a shift in his energy, something more desperate, like he was doubling down on his usual aggression to mask an unspoken vulnerability. And it wasn't just longtime watchers who picked up on the shift. Casual internet browsers were suddenly encountering these clips and sharing them. Before long, rumors of the shrimp controversy began circulating. It sounds absurd at first, but in the age of online culture, a single rumor can expand into a full-blown fiasco almost overnight. People began mocking him with memes, referencing his micro-status to undercut the alpha male image he'd painstakingly cultivated. Was it true? Was it just an outrageous troll? Nobody could be certain at first, but what tipped the scales was his reaction. Instead of ignoring it or laughing it off, Wes Watson seemed to take it personally, very personally. His responses on social media became more agitated. Every post or video laced with challenges to random people he called keyboard warriors, inviting them to come see him in person, measure his height, and, bizarrely, measure anything else they wanted to measure. That over-the-top response served only to confirm, for many, that maybe there was fire beneath the smoke. And of course, the internet loves nothing more than a meltdown. Each time Wes raged about the allegations, it spurred more jokes, more memes, and more speculation. People from all corners started voicing opinions. Maybe he really was insecure, maybe it was a publicity stunt, or maybe he was just tired of the constant jabs at his manhood. Regardless of the real reason, the louder he shouted, the more people pointed out the possibility that his bravado was actually overcompensation. It became less about the actual rumor, and more about how fascinatingly rattled he appeared. The entire fiasco took on a life of its own, with bystanders gawking at what felt like a real-time unraveling of the alpha male brand he'd created. At one point, he even roped Angie, someone close to him, into the fray. She posted a public defense of his image, attempting to shield him from the mounting criticism. The unexpected twist was how she drew parallels between defending him and defending children, as though standing up for her partner's rumored shortfall was on the same moral plane as protecting innocent minors. If that strategy was meant to garner support, it spectacularly backfired. Social media quickly latched on to the bizarre comparison, labeling it absurd and insensitive. People couldn't fathom why she would align such unrelated concerns. Comments exploded. How can someone compare a grown man's rumor battle to the vulnerability of children? Every piece of Angie's defense gave the internet fresh material to amplify the questions swirling around Wes Watson's entire public persona. Up until this point, he'd tried to convey that he was a cut above other so-called motivation gurus. He would often say he was the real deal, having lived a hard life that tested him in ways lesser men wouldn't understand. He framed himself as this unstoppable force who overcame adversity through sheer will, and that was appealing for a time. People love a redemption story. But ironically, the meltdown was making it hard to see the redemption in him. Instead, viewers started to pick up on incongruities. One moment, he'd say he never freezes under pressure, that he always executes when challenged. Then stories circulated about him trembling when confronted in real life, shaking when bigger men pressed him, or doubling back on his own words when real conflict appeared. And there was another tidbit that left many scratching their heads. His own admission that he couldn't finish in certain intimate situations. Taken alone, maybe that confession wouldn't be so peculiar. But in the context of someone who prided himself on raw masculinity, it fed directly into all the rumor-fueled chatter about overcompensation. Predictably, these controversies spilled over onto all the platforms he inhabited. Any attempt he made to re-establish control, like boasting about his unstoppable drive or proclaiming he was the first of his kind, only gave critics more to chew on. The meltdown wasn't just a freak show for the curious. It started eroding his credibility among his own followers. Some supporters stood by him, praising his intensity, but plenty began drifting away, turned off by the endless outbursts. People started asking, is this guy for real? Or has it all been an act? Suddenly, the wise-sounding motivational speaker they once admired came across as a furious man in a flashy car, looking for a fight that nobody quite understood. And that's when the conversation about what alpha really means reared its head. Traditional definitions of alpha behavior revolve around calm confidence, composure under pressure, and an ability to lead by example rather than by the volume of one's voice. By screaming into the camera about how unstoppable he was, by challenging random strangers on the internet to measure him in every way possible, Wes Watson seemed to personify the opposite of that quiet, effortless self-assurance. Viewers who had once been captivated by his high-energy style started questioning whether his theatrics were merely that, an ongoing performance meant to mask deeper insecurities. The more he tried to persuade everyone of his alpha status, the less they believed him. In many ways, it was a textbook example of how too much bravado can poison the very image you're trying to uphold. Critics, on the other hand, had a field day dissecting every new rant. They called it the natural consequence of building a persona on shaky ground. When your brand hinges on presenting yourself as an untouchable force of nature, any crack in that facade gets magnified. The shrimp fiasco was the crack, and it burst open a floodgate of mockery that left him reeling. At times, his videos took on an almost panicked tone, as though he was trying to outrun the rumor by out-ranting it. But the internet has a short attention span for serious discussions and an endless appetite for comedic takes, so each meltdown inevitably became a meme. Ironically, every time he insisted that he was too fearless to care what people thought, it seemed like he cared more than anyone else. For better or worse, the drama began overshadowing everything else about his brand. People who once turned to him for motivation found themselves focusing on the spectacle of his outbursts instead of the content of his advice. Friends and followers questioned if this was an orchestrated ploy for engagement. After all, in the world of social media, controversy often drives clicks. Yet, the sincerity of his frustration made that theory less convincing. He didn't seem like a man calmly orchestrating chaos. He seemed genuinely disturbed by the mockery and the jabs at his masculinity. Regardless of whether it was staged or real, the meltdown had become the main event, and the motivational talk that once hooked viewers slipped into the background. That shift in focus threatened to damage his long-term credibility. Whatever ambitions he had as a speaker, coach, or influencer were now tangled in this comedic storyline that nobody was about to forget. Some speculated he would have to double down on shock tactics just to remain relevant. Others believed he might pivot and try to rebrand, stepping away from the alpha rhetoric entirely. But rebranding could be tricky when so many people still see you as the loud, roided-out figure screaming insults from the driver's seat of a luxury car. If he tried to go gentle and introspective all of a sudden, would anyone buy it? Or would they see it as another layer of performance? For many viewers, the real question became, does the meltdown represent a genuine unraveling of the man behind the alpha mask? Or is it a calculated attempt to keep eyeballs glued to him? The truth might lie somewhere in between. Even if it started from a place of real insecurity, once the controversy caught fire, it offered an opportunity to capitalize on the attention. Controversies have an odd way of fueling influencer growth if managed carefully. People tune in to see the train wreck, and in the process might get hooked on the personality at the center of it. But there's a limit. Go too far, and you risk coming across as a caricature rather than a compelling personality. The meltdown teetered on that edge for quite some time, and many believe it toppled right over. Angie's involvement added an almost surreal dimension to the drama. The post she made in support of him felt mismatched at best, downright bizarre at worst. Instead of calming the waters, her defense stoked them. People questioned the credibility of both of them, interpreting her stance as either forced loyalty or genuine obliviousness to how strange her comparisons sounded. It was, in short, a perfect storm of internet absurdity, a micro-rumor, an alpha meltdown, and a poorly executed defense that referenced children in the same breath. If it were a movie script, critics might say it was too ridiculous to be believable. But this was real life, or at least as real as life can seem in front of a camera and a social media audience. From a purely analytical standpoint, this meltdown offered a fascinating glimpse into how public figures handle unexpected critiques. In theory, the best move might have been to address the rumor in a light-hearted way, laugh at it, shrug it off, or ignore it completely. By engaging it so intensely, Wes Watson gave it power. And in the internet's eyes, when you react that strongly, you're essentially confirming the rumor. The sheer volume of his outbursts convinced many people he was deeply bothered. Some defenders tried to argue that he was simply being authentic, showing genuine rage at being mocked unjustly. But that perspective held less weight as the meltdown rolled on, amplifying with each new video. All this drama begs the question, where does he go from here? One possibility is that he'll escalate further, attempting to outdo himself with each rant to prove that he's still the top dog, the unstoppable force who never backs down. Another possibility is that he'll fade away for a while, letting the heat die down before re-emerging with a fresh angle. Observers differ on which scenario is more likely. There's also a chance he might address the meltdown in a major rebranding effort, launching into a story of personal growth. I was tested by the entire internet, and I emerged stronger. After all, if he's as savvy as some believe, he might spin this humiliating episode into a new motivational lesson about resilience. Yet the sincerity of that pivot would remain under heavy scrutiny. Has the meltdown's damage already been done, or could a triumphant comeback overshadow the memory of shrimp jokes and bitter diatribes? For fans who stuck around, the meltdown created a bizarre kind of loyalty test. Some parted ways, unable to reconcile the image of their once inspiring figure with the unhinged persona they saw raving on camera. Others stayed on board, either finding his anger entertaining or convincing themselves this was just another test of his authenticity. And still others hovered in the middle, uncertain whether to laugh or feel sympathy. It's an undeniably human reaction to flail when you feel attacked, but seeing it on a grand internet stage can turn that flailing into a public spectacle. The meltdown was messy, both comedic and tragic, a testament to how fragile even the loudest among us can be when poked in just the right spot. One factor complicating his efforts to rehabilitate his image is that he's publicly associated himself with a particular brand of hypermasculinity. That brand thrives on unwavering confidence, borderline invulnerability. The minute vulnerabilities become public, and especially vulnerabilities tied to physical or sexual insecurities, it can undercut that entire persona. Every outraged video he put out seemed to confirm the exact type of insecurity he claimed he never had. It was the internet's dream scenario, the mighty alpha undone by the one rumor he couldn't handle. The memes practically wrote themselves, and his attempts to squash them only gave them new life. In a sense, the meltdown illustrates a fundamental law of internet fame. Transparency can be a double-edged sword. When you're constantly on display, any perceived flaw can quickly become the focal point of public discussion. If you respond with genuine self-awareness or humor, you might turn it into an endearing moment. But if you lash out with hostility, you risk turning a mild curiosity into a raging wildfire of mockery. Wes Watson, for whatever reason, chose the second path. Maybe he felt that acknowledging the jokes on a light note would undermine his tough guy image. Or maybe he truly couldn't stomach the idea that people were making fun of him in such a personal way. Whatever the motive, the meltdown left a gigantic question mark hanging over his entire brand. The meltdown also underscores how easily personal drama can overshadow the actual content a creator puts out. Were it not for the shrimp fiasco and his furious reactions, many people wouldn't even know about his existence. He might have continued quietly building an audience based on fitness tips and motivational rants. Instead, he's now primarily known as that meltdown guy, a cautionary tale among influencers about what happens when you take online trolls too seriously. Even if some portion of viewers remain genuinely entertained or motivated by his old messages, the overshadowing effect of this controversy is enormous. Years from now, if someone brings up Wes Watson, there's a strong chance the first thing people remember isn't going to be his advice about discipline. It'll be the meltdown, the anger, the comedic references to a rumored physical shortcoming. And what about Angie in all of this? Her role remains a puzzle. Was she doing damage control out of genuine concern? Or was she inadvertently fueling the fire by linking her defense of him with broader moral stands? Her posts implied she felt she had to protect him at all costs, even conflating the defense of an adult partner with the defense of innocent children. This approach baffled many and inspired countless online critiques, questioning both her judgment and the sincerity of their collective stance. If she hoped to quell the storm, it's safe to say she achieved the opposite result. The mismatch between her grandiose defense and the actual issue at hand only led viewers to question their entire relationship dynamic. None of this is to say that the meltdown is the end of the road. The internet forgets scandals almost as quickly as it creates them, most times anyway. People can rebound if they're able to craft a compelling redemption arc, or if another juicier controversy emerges to distract everyone. But there's a stain left by such high-profile meltdowns, especially when they involve personal insecurities laid bare for the world to see. It's the type of public fiasco that can linger in the public consciousness, popping up again whenever he tries to pivot to something new. If there's one thing the internet is good at, it's never letting people forget. A few watchers have expressed pity rather than glee at his unraveling. They see a man trapped by his own persona, forced to defend himself against a rumor that directly challenges his brand of masculinity. In their view, this meltdown isn't so much comedic as it is emblematic of how toxic expectations can do real harm, even to those who project invulnerability. For them, the meltdown reveals a deeper tragedy, a person struggling with the stress of upholding an image so rigid that any chink in the armor feels like an existential threat. Whether that perspective is correct or not, it adds another layer to the conversation. Maybe there's a hint of tragedy behind the comedic memes and the alpha bravado. In the end, it might come down to a simple truth. No matter how loudly you claim to be fearlessly alpha, insecurity has a way of creeping through every crack. And once the audience sees even a hint of that vulnerability, the entire performance can collapse faster than any motivational monologue can mend. Wes Watson has staked his identity on being the toughest, loudest, and most unstoppable force around. Whether he can still hold on to that identity after the meltdown, after the shrimp fiasco and Angie's strange defenses, remains the burning question. For the countless viewers who have found themselves drawn into this spectacle, one thing is for sure. They'll be tuning in for whatever happens next, because where there's drama, there's an audience waiting to see if the once mighty alpha can somehow roar back, or if this meltdown is just the start of a long, unrecoverable fall. And so, we arrive at the crux of the matter. Perhaps the meltdown says less about the specific rumor and more about the fragility that lurks behind carefully curated online personas. For now, the storyline is wide open. Maybe we'll see an apology tour, or perhaps an unrepentant campaign to double down on the old alpha talk. Only time will tell if Wes Watson can wrestle back the narrative and rebuild himself in a way that resonates with viewers, or if this entire fiasco will serve as a permanent reminder that beneath every loud voice claiming invincibility, there may lie doubts that can topple even the most imposing facade. The next move is his, and the internet waits, ready to either applaud his transformation or fuel yet another round of controversy.